life is hard. It just is. It takes a lot of work, whether you do what we propose or you don't do what we propose. We just think if you do this, you will get results that you like better than if you don't do these things.
It's a pleasure to be joined by Edward Lamont, one of the founders of Next Action Associates and co-author of a new book, Team: Getting Things Done with Others.
There is a way of doing your work that will allow you to get more of the things that you care about done with less stress. What is it that we need to do in order to deliver high performance, but also to maintain a sustainable, fun way of being as a team? The collaboration thing is as natural for human beings as sitting around a campfire having conversation. You need people to actually participate in the creation of a team they want to be on in order for them to want to play on that team. If you want healthy, high performance, then you got to be saying no a lot more than you currently are.
If you were to leave people with one getting things done team's tip, what would it be? It's a pleasure to be joined by Edward Lamont, one of the founders of Next Action Associates and co-author of a new book, Team: Getting Things Done with Others, and we're going to dive in today. Ed, it's fantastic to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Getting Things Done, or GTD, as it's known, was developed by your co-author, David Allen, some 25 years ago. It's a productivity management system, a set of principles for personal workflow that helps individuals find better ways to organize their thoughts, prioritize, create lasting habits. It feels a very welcome, maybe even a long overdue evolution of that successful system to look at teams. When I read, especially nonfiction, I'm often as interested in the author as the content. And the first thing that struck me about you was the diversity of your professional background and how your life experiences maybe instilled the importance and the art of human connection and possibly prepared the ground for what you do now. Tell us more about your journey to being a coach and a trainer of organizations and senior teams.
Well, I actually, it was a bit of a car crash initially because I came to Europe when I was 18 because I wanted to be the most unflappable trial lawyer of all time. And I thought that if I spent some time cycling around Europe, I would gather so much experience that no one would ever be able to surprise me in a court of law, and I would win all my cases. My entire family, basically going back generations, were in law, so that's all I really knew. It all backfired horribly when I met a German fakir on a beach in Gran Canaria and learned how to juggle. And it was like I caught an infection of some kind, and I just couldn't stop throwing things at the sky and trying to catch them before they hit the beach again. And a few years later, I was good enough that people were willing to pay to watch. So I put myself through university, doing performances. And when I finished university, had no desire to teach the languages that I had learned, and went off to Paris to study theater. And then as a result of an accident, had to move into something entirely different. So I went into commodities, as you do. And
I can see the natural connection.
Well, there is a bit of juggling in both of them, but I reported on commodities for a while, and then I became a commodities broker. And then with apologies to anybody who's still in that business, for me, the meaninglessness of it was such that I really had to get out. And that's when I started looking around, in my mid-30s, what do you want to be when you grow up? And did a lot of research, spent a lot of time thinking that through, and came up with this thing that I didn't really know existed, which was coach, trainer, consultant, and got into that about 26 years ago now. And effectively, as far as I'm concerned, hit the career lottery. There's no better fit for the person that I am than the thing that I do now.
And that's a great sort of nutshell of the journey you've been on. How did you come into contact with David and the getting things done set of principles? And then how did that impact on your life once you made that discovery?
So I've got David's book was given to me actually early on in my journey as a trainer, coach, consultant, because I was actually being, let's just say I was being too successful for the systems that were supporting me. And so I was working with great clients. I was flying around the world, getting paid to do work that I loved in, interesting exotic locations. But I couldn't really feel the success that I was having because I was just so stressed by trying to keep up with everything that needed to be coordinated around that. Someone saw what was going on. They gave me this book, which of course I didn't read because I didn't have time. But about 6 months later, after it had gathered a bunch of dust on my bedside table, I took it with me on a flight to New York, skimmed it, and got three ideas that I thought were, really potentially life changing. Like if they were true, then I could have a fundamentally different relationship with my work and with my life. So I read the book, I read it again, I underlined it, highlighted it, gave it to my assistant, and we spent 2 or 3 days just putting it into place. At the end of which I felt, massively more productive, and much more clear than I had ever been. So, I mean, at that point, I'm interested. What I didn't know at that point was that I had done most of it sort of sideways. It wasn't exactly backwards, but it wasn't what I was supposed to do. And it was probably 2 or 3 years later before I got to see David, and in Boston, and I went to one of his seminars. We hit it off. Um, I went over to him in a break, and I just said, I don't know if you have any idea how much energy you're setting free in the universe right here. Like there was probably 100 people in the room, and if even a fraction of them were having the experience that I was having, then there was a lot of energy being set free. So we fell into conversation. We met again a couple of months later in London. I did his seminar, I think, 3 times before getting coached, and eventually we tried to get something together. It didn't work out in 2004 when we first met. Did work out in 2008, and then subsequent to that, I've been teaching and promoting it in Europe. The change for me was really dramatic. Like I went from being somebody who was, a smart kid, um, with very little structure, to someone who was able to get, significant things done, not because my personality had changed, not because I'd become overnight an organized person. I had simply understood how things got done. David's framework was, this is how it gets done. There is a way of doing your work that will allow you to get more of the things that you care about done with less stress. That's the super ultra nutshell. The slightly longer, the more elongated nutshell, perhaps, is that, if you have something on your mind, it's in the wrong place. You need to be making sure that you write things down more, capturing those things somewhere outside of your head. If you do that, your brain is freed up to do what it was meant to do, which is to actually think about important things rather than trying to remember things that you wanted yourself to remember. Then you need to think about those things and hopefully think about them in a constructive way. We think, at the bare minimum, think about, do you need to do anything about it? And if you do, where do you want to get to with it? And what are you going to do actually physically next about that? And then, in order to prevent them climbing back up into your brain, you need to put them somewhere in a system. We don't really care what that system is. Let's just call it a dashboard of all of your commitments. And that dashboard will allow you to prioritize well, make good choices about what you're doing, and feel good about the choices because you'll also know what you're not doing. And that only works if semi-regularly, once a week or so, you make sure that it's complete and up to date.
When I was reading, one of the things that really hit me between the eyes was three words, and those three words were healthy high performance. And I thought what was really interesting was that I think we all conceptually know what high performance is, and certainly, let's say, looking back in history, what high performance looks like. But adding healthy sets a very different sort of perspective on what high performance is. And I would love to hear more about how you came up with that concept of healthy high performance and what it actually means in the context of the system that you've developed for teams.
So it came, through, conversations with David over time. We're looking for, what is the equivalent of one of the concepts that showed up in the initial book, which was mind like water. It's also been described as the productive experience. It's a kind of a flow state in activity. And as we thought about this at the teams level, healthy high performance came. And as you say, right, high performance is easy, relatively speaking. And having good health is easy as long as you don't have to perform. Holding the creative tension of both of those things at the same time is actually the more difficult challenge, right? And we see that day in, day out. I mean, I see it in my work all the time. People who have basically, they've spent their entire career focusing on high performance, and they've spent very little time thinking about either their health or the health of their teams. And so they've traded their health for wealth over the course of their career. And then towards the end of their career or afterwards, they're spending all of their wealth to try and buy their health back, it just seems like an idiotic thing to do to me, right? So this idea of healthy high performance is using that creative tension to see, okay, well, what is it that we need to do in order to deliver high performance, but also to maintain a sustainable, fun way of being as a team? Not just in terms of like individuals need to have their physical, mental, social, and spiritual health. Absolutely. But what is health for a team? What are the structures and processes and standards that the team needs to decide upon for itself so it can continue to perform year on year?
The concept of really focusing on teams now feels just so important on so many levels, not just because of what's going on in the workplace and the way that teams that are maybe spread out globally work, but there's some really big problems in the world right now, which, without putting too fine a point on it, we're going to need to work together to tackle. Whether we talk about employee engagement, and I think you reference a Gallup poll in the book, or we look at decarbonisation, or any one of a number of huge challenges. Do you want to unpack that a bit more and your perspective on some of those challenges that we simply must tackle as a global team?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that I'm proud to have both done the original GTD work for years and to have written this book is I think there's something really wrong about the fact that we have more wealth than ever. In as a species, we have this astonishing wealth that we've created, and yet we still are working people to be husks of human beings, right? That I think is one of our biggest challenges, particularly in the developed world, where we have people who have way more than they can ever use or spend, who continue to work themselves as if they are going to lose everything tomorrow. So there's something that's not quite right about that, and I think what we've tried to do in the book is to give them a way of thinking about healthy and high performance in a way that will give them their life back while they continue to do whatever thing that they've decided is meaningful for them. Um, if we take a step back, like a long way back, um, I think collaboration is inherent to who we are as human beings, right? It's one of the things that I was reading recently was that they think part of the reason that Homo sapiens were able to outcompete the Neanderthals were that we simply like to work together more than the Neanderthals. So we were able to hunt differently in ways that were less lethal for us. for example. But the collaboration thing is as natural for human beings as sitting around a campfire having conversation, right? It's just in us. We feel good when we do it. And it's a good thing that we do because, as you say, we have really, really big problems that need solving. Um, I've kind of addressed the engagement thing. I think the highest levels of engagement are in the United States, something like 33%. I think France was down around 10% last time I checked. The UK is not much higher. Europe is much lower than the Americas. Um, that just seems crazy that we can be, this far through the 21st century and still have the majority of people who come to work disengaged by their work, feeling disempowered, turned off, doing whatever version of quiet quitting. We're now quiet quitting, quiet holidays, whatever. Um, the way forward there is to have conversations with each other on teams. Uh, at an organizational level, they will be probably ineffective. You need people to actually participate in the creation of a team they want to be on in order for them to want to play on that team. The clarity piece is, basically you need it in all aspects of your team, because if you don't have clear information about what's happening, for instance, it's very difficult to make a plan about where you want to get to, but you need clarity about where you want to get to. So clarity on both of those things actually starts to create motivation, right? And we know where we are, we like it, we don't like it, and we know where we want to go. Hopefully we like that. What we know about human psychology is just knowing those two things will begin to engage your psychology to help you move towards where you want to go. You need clarity about who's doing what on the team, right? Because otherwise you're going to have multiple people trying to do repeat work on the same things, or you're going to have to put everybody on a distribution so everyone's informed, although only two people need to be. So that clarity is similarly important. You need to be clear on what is the capacity of your team and where you are with regards to that capacity. So now we're back talking about the healthy part of healthy high performance. Part of what's happening is because people have no idea what the capacity of the team is, and they have no idea what the team actually has on, then you can swim around in that mess for years, burning people out and kind of not really being clear on why. You need clarity, right? So that's clarity. Sufficient trust. We don't think you need to trust people like you trusted, a loving parent or a loving grandparent in your life. But you do need to trust that if people say they're going to do something, they're going to make best efforts and or communicate that they couldn't get it done before you're standing there waiting for them. It's really just the basis of being able to work together is, when you speak, I have some sense that you mean what you say. That's a great starting place. Delivering on your commitments is another place to build trust, for instance. If we go on to the idea of open communication, it's the same. Those two previous ones are fed by open communication. Difficult to get clarity if you don't get open communication. Difficult to get trust if you feel like people are keeping things from each other. It doesn't have to be loving communication, right? It just needs to be that no one is hiding important things from the team that the team needs to know. Learning, if the team isn't learning, basically it's destined for extinction, because your clients are and your competitors are. So you need to have some practice of consistently learning, probably building that in to some framework that you can't avoid as you work. So just regular review meetings, for instance, as long as they're conducted well, will result in learning. And then the final one is diversity, and this was a longer conversation because it's clear that for a lot of the last 200 years there wasn't a heck of a lot of diversity on teams in places where you and I live, but there was always diversity of thought, and without diversity of thought, then you kind of get stuck in um, groupthink. If everybody's seeing the same thing, then it's very difficult for you to interpret the world fast enough in a world that's moving incredibly quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, diversity delivers perspective, right? And I think to your point on learning, one of the things that's been very important and very notable in the last 5 years or so has been an amplified conversation about the importance of learning from failure within organizations. And I think when you see some of the most powerful organizations in the world, the Googles and the Amazons, who celebrate and hold up good learning from failure, good failure, and how you can use those learnings to deliver wisdom, experience, go bigger, go faster, go better, go simpler, to deliver a higher value proposition. It just makes so much sense. Where does leadership show up in all of the things that we've talked about? What is their role? What is their responsibility? How does that waterfall down influence culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's the leadership one was not one that we set out to do anything with, but then as we got further into the research, it became clear that leaders do have a significant impact on teams if they're good. Um, Unfortunately, they also have a significant impact if they're bad. So we needed to have a a look into what kind of leadership do we think teams need, because if you look into the world, a lot of people are dissuaded from leadership positions because they look at what the world puts forth as this is what a leader looks like, and it looks like, to a lot of people, well, it looks like a lying swine. Well, and I'm not one, so why would I want that kind of role? We came at it from a slightly different perspective, which was that the team needs certain things fulfilled on the team, almost mechanically. You don't need to be a hugely charismatic individual to be a leader, because actually the leader, if they're really good, is developing other humans, right? They're developing the capacity of other humans, both individually to perform at a higher level, but also to collaborate with each other. That was where we fetched up someone who's doing these things in an almost mechanical way that allow people to perform to their best, but also to collaborate well together. Um, and we see some people doing it, but it's quiet leadership. It's not loud. It's not narcissistic. It's people just getting on with this needs to be done. It needs to be written down. It needs to be put over here. It's not sexy at all. But if you're on a team like that, then you have less friction, less noise getting in the way of how you work with the people that you work with.
And there is a chapter in here about saying no. Tell us about saying no.
Well, it was the longest chapter in the book by about 100%, and eventually we had to make some editorial choices and lose about 50% of it. It's still a significant chapter because it's huge. I mean, again, we come back to the idea of healthy high performance, and if you take that as the core proposition of the book, that there is a way to have healthy high performance, then we needed to include everything that would help you get there. And if the team is unable to say no often enough to protect the individuals on the team from losing their health, mental and physical and otherwise, then uh, we can't propose healthy high performance, right? So we had to do something about the no question. Um, I've been looking at this for a long time, specifically in my work around GTD. And where we got to was it's difficult for individuals to say no often enough. Um, it's almost like they're slightly, I won't say defenseless, but they are nowhere near as powerful as the current of digital and analog commitments that come their way every day. And there's a cultural thing in play. There's all kinds of things in play, but it just looks like individuals don't seem to be strong enough to deal with the current of uh, commitments that come their way every day. So, taking this to a team level, you can start to give them a little bit of support, a little bit of encouragement to manage their work differently and have the authorization to do so. So, the team needs to be saying no, but it also needs to give all the members of the team authorization to say no to stakeholders unless they come back and consult with the team, because otherwise you have a team that thinks it's doing this much, but is actually doing this much because of all the individual commitments that people on the team have signed up for. So yeah, it's a critical piece. If you want healthy high performance, then you got to be saying no a lot more than you currently are.
As we bring this to a close, if you were to leave people with one getting things done team's tip that they could deploy in their life that would be a kind of easy on to that ladder, the principles, engaging more with this in their life, what would it be?
Well, I think the first thing would be to, look at this idea of healthy high performance and just decide if that's of any interest to you as an individual, right? I was doing a talk last week, and at a certain stage, someone was saying, "Well, does this work?" And da 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 da. And I was like, "Well, do you feel like the way that you're currently working is sustainable?" And everybody in the room shook their head. Nobody felt like the way that they were working was sustainable. So then if you don't feel like the way that you're working is sustainable, then I would encourage you to go find people on your team who would also feel like, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I would try to get them on board for defining really simple standards about how you want to communicate with each other and how you want to meet with each other. That's the lowest hanging fruit out there. Define some simple standards that will save you time and respect your own and other people's time.